What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Diehard MMA podcast. I am your host, as always. My name is Clint. I'm here rocking with you on a Monday night. Apparently, there's basketball happening or something like that. I don't know. So we're talking fights. This week is UFC Vegas 260, big-time pay-per-view. I am excited to break it all down. How is everybody doing this evening? We've got Lucas, got us. First one right in the chat. We've got Johan Leibert. We've got Phil, Siri, we've got John Moore. You're right, my friend. Time to bounce back. Last week was not a good one, but we are all about the variance. We know. We'll get it back. Bufo on the beat. Tom Chambers, Valerie Marcy, Juan G, Bill Withers, Xander B. We've got Rose Clark in the house. Lots of people hanging out with us. Already 76 active people in the chat. What's up, everybody? I am super pumped to be here this week. I'm a little pissed off after last week's meltdown, but I am super happy that we have such an awesome guest to help me bear through this. My man, none other than James Lynch, joining us on the show live today. How you doing, James?
Doing well, Clint. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure, and happy to be here.
Hey, love having you, man. One of the all-time GOAT guests here on the show. Thank you for spending your Monday evening with us. James, I got to address the elephant in the room. I dropped over 6 units on Saturday. Maybe one of the, not maybe one of the worst. We've had some worse nights before, but that's never a good feeling. I went like 4-6 on my fight predictions. Just a wild night where it was opposite day, and I got absolutely everything wrong, man.
It's one of those cards. It was tough even going in. I thought there was a lot of fights that could have gone either way. A lot of upsets on the matchup, including the main event. Derek Brunson getting the win over Kevin Holland. I know a lot of people who were high on Kevin Holland. I was not one of them, but in general, there's it happens, man. I mean, you're going to have cards that there's a lot of unpredictability, and that's what happened last week on that card as well. So there you go. It happens, man. It happens. You're not going to win every
Yeah. It happens, and the worst part is it's kind of my own fault too, because at the 9th hour, at the very last minute, I decided to pull the trigger on a couple of plays that I knew I shouldn't have touched and I should have stayed off of, and I had that feeling of, you know what, I don't want to be sitting here when I'm wrong, or I'm sorry, I don't want to be sitting here when I'm right and not have the money in my pocket. So I went ahead and I made the bet. I threw down on Roman Dolidze, even though it was a close fight. I knew not to pull that trigger. I knew not to make that bet. I did it anyway, lost that one. I ended up pulling the trigger on Gustavo Lopez. I knew not to do that one too, but it was tempting. I got in there, didn't work out. And really the one that got me off guard was Song Kanan, man. The one way I never expected to lose my bet on Song Kanan was Max Griffin by knockout. I mean, unless it was like a late ground and pound type of finish, never expected him to come out and land a bomb like that on the feet. So just one of those ones where you feel all gross inside and got to shake it off.
Look, I mean, heading into that fight, how many fights did Max Griffin go the distance where he had those close fights? Thiago Alves, so many matchups of his would go the full 3 rounds. And, it happens. That's why this is the best sport in the world. Anything can happen. I do got to give you credit, though. You had Grant Dawson by knockout in I think it was the third round prop, or
the third round prop. Yeah, 13-1.
Credit to you, man. I don't think I would have expected Grant Dawson to finish Leo Santos. So you gotta, listen, you take your licks, but then you got to enjoy the good ones too. And that was a smart play on your part, because it was like, what, plus 1,000 or something crazy like that. That's what I was saying.
1,300. Yeah. 13-1. So that was, that was the
bright,
bad
shiny you can't dwell on the bad stuff all the time, so I hear
exactly.
You.
Thank you for pointing that out, because, we hit that round 3 prop, and that basically saved everybody's night. We'd be in a giant hole if it wasn't for that. And then we did hit Montserrat Ruiz right before the fight kicked off. If you follow me on Twitter, I rarely lock in action late like that, and that one does not count on my official record. I never count those last-minute bets or the live bets if we ever get any of those, because I know most people are listening to this, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They're not necessarily following me on Twitter live as the fights are happening. So I never give myself credit for those. My record would look a little bit better if I did. But we got Montserrat Ruiz at plus 260. I know a couple people saved a little bit of cash there. So yeah, all in all, got to dust it off, got to move on. We've got a hell of an exciting card to talk about here. UFC Vegas 260, James. Let's kick this thing off right, man. We are looking at an early preliminary card of unfortunately, a couple fights potentially getting canceled due to COVID, but maybe some silver lining there. We've got a week ahead, so maybe some late notice fill-ins and some new opponents, some fights will be added on. I'm crossing my fingers to fill this thing out. But the first fight on the card is one that's super interesting to me. Middleweight fight between Marc-Andre Barriault taking on Abu Azaitar. So if y'all think of the Azaitar name, you may recognize that from his little brother and what's in the bag. We all still want to know. But Abu Azaitar is coming in here taking on a really middle of the road middleweight in Marc-Andre Barriault. He's fighting out of Sanford MMA and really just kind of a meat and potatoes type of guy. He's well-rounded, but he doesn't really do excellent anywhere. His only UFC win is over the 0-4 Oscar Pichota. And I'll be honest, James, that was a perfect spot for Barriault. And I still was too scared to actually pull the trigger and bet on him in that spot because he's just not that great. So here against Abu, I'm looking at it thinking, man, they've got Marc-Andre Barriault as the favorite. They have him sitting slight favorite, nothing crazy, but minus 125, minus 115. You can get even money on Abu or plus 105. And I'm like, what am I missing here? Why am I not smashing Abu Azaitar? And then I got into the tape. And I'll be honest, man, he's nothing to write home about either. He wings these big, wild, heavy punches. He blitz attacks forward with 4 and 5 punch combos. He's got some big power, but really from a technical standpoint, it's just not there. If he doesn't clip you with one of those big bombs, he's probably going to get tired and he's probably going to get pieced up over the course of the fight. And all of a sudden I'm sitting here going, that's why Marc-Andre Barriault is the slight favorite here in this fight. What's your thought on this one, man? How do you feel about this fight? And do you have a lean either way on this one?
Stay far, far away from this fight. This looks like a trap in a number of different ways. And this is something I talked about this morning on my show because it actually was even money when I was looking at it this morning. I see that Barriault is the slight favorite here, but Barriault, that win was turned into a no contest, and I believe it was USADA related. I remember he did have an issue with USADA. That was part of the reason why we hadn't seen him in action since June of last year. So a lot of question marks. His 3 losses as well, not exactly world beaters by any means. Andrew Sanchez, Christoph Yako, and Park. Those are not names that you think of as sort of, top, forces to be reckoned with, so to speak, in the middleweight division. So that's kind of a red flag as well. I'm quite familiar with Mark. I watched him fight or Marc-Andre, I should say, in TKO back in the day, because that was in Canada, obviously. And you could see that they were sort of building him up. They were giving him, not cans, but less than subpar competition. I remember when he fought Adam Hunter, not the comedian, but the former UFC fighter. You remember the same guy who got busted for a ton of steroids and didn't end up fighting Ryan James, if that sounds familiar. Adam hadn't fought in a couple of years, and that was the win that got Marc-Andre into the UFC. So there's that. Brendan Kornberger was an older fighter. He beat him as well. So I've never been that sold on Marc-Andre Barriault. I like the fact that he switched camps because obviously whatever he was doing before was not working. But yeah, to me, he's very inconsistent. He's almost reminds me a bit of like an Eric Anders in the sense that this guy cannot string together a win streak. It's, you don't know what type of fighter you're going to get. And same thing with Azaitar here as well here. He's got a win over Vitor Miranda, but last time I checked, that guy also had a 3-fight losing streak. So again, with the sample size we have in terms of both guys, I just don't think there's enough here to figure out a definitive pick. If I have to pick though, I will go Marc-Andre Barriault, a little bit younger, has a bit of a height and reach advantage in the fight, but that's it. Like I just would say stay away from this one. It just has inconsistency written all over it, and this is one of those fights where I'll gladly not bet and just sit back and watch and hope for the best.
I'm with you, James. I try to tell people on the show always, I am not a professional sports bettor. I'm a MMA fan, a degenerate gambler, and I can talk out of my ass. So that's what I do here on the podcast. I always love having action on the first fight of the night. If I can find an angle, it is so great to kick the night off with something fun. And if we're in the interest of putting any money in our pockets, we can't bet this first fight, man, because I can absolutely see Abu Azaitar landing one of these big explosive bombs on Marc-Andre Barriault and putting him away because that's what he does. But at the same time, I can see Marc-Andre having leveled up just ever so slightly enough. This guy is a grinder. He's hard to hurt. He's hard to knock out, and he's good at controlling people up against the fence. He's good at making a fight really boring and dragging it out. So if he has his way, he's going to slow this thing down, and when Abu Azaitar gasses out, we don't know what he's going to look like in the second round or the third round. I mean, Marc-Andre might be prime here for another late finish. Maybe this is another classic round 3 sprinkle situation for me. But besides that, I'm not really going to have much here because both these guys' victory conditions, they're going to look like minus 500 favorites if they're the ones in control. And it could also be a nasty slobber knocker back and forth type of fight where you have no idea who's going to end up winning it. It goes to the judges' scorecards. It's hairy, it's close. You don't want to be on this fight. So for me, it's a pass. I'm going to ever so slightly lean with Abu Azaitar here simply because he's managed by Ali, man. And, those guys, they get their way. This is a hand-picked matchup. He's supposed to win this fight. Ali doesn't give his guys tough fights. And apparently he's been working some with Khabib. And that, for me, I know he's not Khabib. I know he's not going to absorb Khabib by osmosis. But if he gets just a little bit of grappling to go along with that striking and can keep the fight where he wants it to be, if he gets a little bit of that conditioning, from wrestling more often, and he's got a slightly better gas tank, we could absolutely see a better version of Abu Azaitar here.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great point, that Ali does typically get, favorable fights for his fighters. But I literally think they just look down the roster and they're like, well, who's better? Because I feel like Marc-Andre Barriault is another guy that I don't even know how he's still in the UFC to a certain degree. I mean, the guy gets a bunch of losses. He has yet to get a victory in the cage here. And the one he did get was a USADA thing. I mean, a lot of other fighters would have been released there. So he must have some dirt on them as well in terms of, him getting another UFC fight. But yeah, I can't say it enough. I would just personally stay away from this fight 100%.
Yeah. And that's, I can't agree with you more. And honestly, man, if it wasn't for, the fight with Pachota, that was a loser leaves town matchup. That was finding who was the bottom of the barrel in the division. And they figured out Pachota was the one. So Marc-Andre gets to stick around for one more fight. And it really feels like this is the spot that they just kind of signed on the dotted line for. They're like, hey, we've got a prospect that we would like to see get a couple of wins. Who do we give him? Well, the guy that just barely survived the chopping block last time. So I'm going to say Abu Azaitar wins this fight, but yeah, no bet here. Moving right along, we have got a featherweight fight, Shane Young taking on Omar Morales. And I will confess to everybody watching, I didn't put a whole lot of effort into studying this fight because it was canceled when I last heard. Apparently, there has been some breaking news that there is a chance that Shane Young might possibly clear the COVID protocol before Saturday. And if that is accurate, we are live on this fight. Now, going off of memory, obviously, Shane Young is a city kickboxing guy. He's another slick striker, another guy that does well on the feet. I mean, what do you expect coming out of city kickboxing? Omar Morales, 10-1. We were on him in a big way last time, and he really let us down, getting that first L. The dude is durable. He's a world-class striker, comes forward, athletic, hits hard. This is going to be a hell of a fight, man. If this one goes off, it's going to be bang until somebody falls, with Omar Morales sitting as a -185 or so favorite. The only issue for me is that even though they're on a bit of a rough run, I don't personally like fading city kickboxing. They just know what they're doing over there. They've got a good system. They've got a good camp. And I thought that someone like Omar Morales was going to be able to mix his takedowns in and stuff like that in his last fight. And he had no interest whatsoever in doing that. So I don't expect him to necessarily go for the takedowns here in this fight. This is going to be a 15-minute stand-up match. And if that's the case, both these guys are hard to finish. Both these guys are slick strikers, and neither of them loses very often. So it maybe is a little bit closer than the line suggests. Again, I got to really dig into this one. If the fight is back on, I will do some more homework for you guys, I promise. But the surface level, I would kind of lean a little bit dog or pass with Shane Young here. How do you feel about this one, James? I
feel the same way. It's a classic case of two strikers. Who's got the better power? I think Omar actually might take it in spades a little bit more there in terms of what he brings to the table. I know he was training at Sanford MMA. I don't know if that's still the case, but they obviously know how to strike over there pretty well, just like city kickboxing does. With Shane Young, it's just he's had kind of a weird career here, right? Because he lost just a decision to Volkanovski, now trains with him. But then you look at the other fights he's got, they're against two guys who are no longer in the UFC. And then his last fight, he was finished in the first round. So I don't know what's going to happen here. I tend to think if I was to pick, I would probably go with Omar in this one, just in terms of, I think if it stays standing, well, I think Shane's maybe the more technical striker. I think Omar's got a little bit more power there. And don't let the age confuse you, because I thought he looked great in his last fight. So, because what was that last fight he had? It was the Giga Chikadze fight, which was a loss. But even then, we're talking about a guy in Giga who, there's a lot of upside there as well. So I don't think that's a bad loss for him to have. He had the Gabriel Benitez win before that. I like Morales in that one, but like you, I didn't really dig too deep into this one just because I didn't even know it was on. So if it is on, I'll take Omar Morales. But again, very close fight.
Yeah. I can absolutely see that point of things. And like I said, this is just surface level. I'm going right off the memory here as far as how these guys go. Totally forgot that he got knocked out by Ludovic Klein in his last fight. And one of those things in MMA, man, how weird is it that you can go a full 15 minutes with freaking Alexander Volkanovski, the current champion, and then he gets knocked out by a newcomer and a guy like Ludovic Klein. I mean, people get caught in MMA. That's why we love it. But, Yeah, that one slipped my memory. I got to go do my homework. So nobody hold me to that prediction, because that's definitely flying by the seat of the pants.
No, for sure. And that's why I follow you on Twitter, right? I mean, Diehard MMA podcast on there. And that way you're always kind of keeping people up to date on if this fight is back on. I'm sure you'll have an update. You always do the after the weigh-ins and all that stuff. So there you go.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing my homework there for me, James. I appreciate the shout out. No next up, we've got a women's flyweight fight, one that we have talked about before. Gillian Robertson taking on Miranda Maverick. This is another one of those ones that got pulled, and here we go. They kicked it down the road just a couple of events, and now we get to talk about it again. Gillian is 9-5. Miranda Maverick is 10-2. And what we've got is Miranda instilled as a pretty solid favorite. -160, -175, somewhere in that ballpark. You can get between +130 and +140 on Gillian Robertson. And last time, if anybody remembers, I planted my flag. You all know I love Gillian Robertson. I love her skill set. I think she's got a lot of what it takes to get to the top of the sport if she can just harness her potential. And this is a spot where I feel like she's being a little bit disrespected. She has been competing with some of the best women that the UFC has to offer in her class. And a couple of the people that she's lost to are ones that really surprised some of us. Talia Santos in her last fight being a prime example of someone who looks amazing, and now everyone suddenly believes in what she is and what she can do. But for some reason, Gillian is a bum for having lost to her. I'm not quite sure why everyone looks down so hard on Gillian. And there it is. I was waiting for it. The simp comments rolling in. I know. I bet on her almost every time, but that's because I always see a path to victory with her. Gillian Robertson is the slightly bigger fighter here. I know that Miranda Maverick is tough. She's very well muscled. She's strong. And Maverick is a better striker probably than Gillian Robertson is. But the only thing is, a lot of people point to the striking being the key here. Miranda Maverick really only has one win by KO or TKO, and it was a bad win over Julija. No, not Julija. I'm blanking on the name here.
No,
James,
it's Jojua, yeah.
Jojua, thank you. I knew I was close.
I think she broke her nose or something. That's what it was. And the doctors came in and stopped it. I think if that was a men's fight, maybe they let it go on a little bit longer. But it was a questionable stoppage. But I think she was on her way to winning it regardless. But we're talking about a fighter who was 8-3 at the time. I mean, it's I don't know. I think Jojua, there wasn't a huge ceiling there for her.
Yeah, and that was kind of the issue here. I think is that it was Jojua, and it was a bad cut. I don't think she even broke her nose. It was just a really bad cut, but they had seen enough. We had all seen enough. I mean, it was apparent that she wasn't going to be in that fight. So I don't have any problems with the stoppage, just because that's where you get that 15-minute prolonged beating and you take years off of a fighter's life for no reason because their corner won't throw the towel in. Nobody protested the stoppage. She was done. I'm okay with it. But that's the one TKO victory that Miranda Maverick has. And the one time Gillian got, TKO'd was against Macy Barber. And we know Macy Barber hits like a freaking truck. I think these are different levels here of power, and people might be giving Miranda Maverick a little bit too much credit. We've seen a couple of hype trains derailed previously. I think this is a step down for Gillian Robertson, and getting +130 or +140 on her, I got to go there. I see value. I think there's a chance for her to win this thing and out-grapple the younger fighter whose best win was Invicta against a fighter that Gillian had no problem handling and has been cut from the UFC. So I'll take the experience. How do you feel about this one, James?
I kind of feel the same way, and I know we talked about this fight before, but to me, what it comes down to is, how is Miranda Maverick going to look on the ground? I know she's had some submission wins, but I think Robertson's sort of the superior fighter there. I don't think she's going to want to stand and trade with Miranda Maverick at this point. I think the value here for sure is on Robertson in this fight, and a lot of people don't like me saying this, but I'm picking Maverick because I think in terms of what she has to go into this fight with, I mean, she's really doesn't have a ton to lose here. I mean, she's on a nice winning streak. She's expected to win. I think also there's some school of thought that because she does full-time schooling and all that, I know that's sort of tapering down for her, that she might even be better than what we've seen before. And the fact that this fight's going to be in the US as opposed to Abu Dhabi, which I know she was talking about how last time she didn't exactly have everything she wanted in that matchup, and she still won. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But the reason I sort of feel this way as well is that Robertson's had UFC experience a lot more than Miranda Maverick in this fight, and I think there is something to say for that. Yes, Maverick has some win over some UFC vets and Deanna Bennett and Pearl Gonzalez, but I think if you look at overall with Robertson, Robertson, she's losing to pretty decent fighters. I mean, the Talita Santos one, yeah, would have liked that one back, I'm sure. Macy Barber, I think that's a fight. If they did it over again, it might be a different result here, especially with how Macy's looked over the last couple fights. But I see this as a pick 'em. Personally, I would not bet Maverick in this spot. I'll pick her here just because, again, I think that, a little bit younger, a little bit more upside, and I think it will end up staying standing. Because here's the thing we're relying on here, Clint, is that can Robertson get Maverick to the ground and submit her? I don't know if she can do that. Miranda Maverick's never been submitted. She's got a pretty good ground game. She has some wins by submission. So I see that as sort of the one path to victory there for Gillian Robertson. Maybe she wins a decision, but she doesn't typically win decisions. She mainly wins either by submission or like I said. So so the pick's going to be Maverick, but I think if you're going to bet this, I could see an opportunity here for Robertson with the plus money. Just again, more UFC experience and does have that submission threat as well. But I think it'll stay standing and Maverick will pick up a decision here.
Okay. And actually, the only thing I want to say is I actually think the decision is on the table here for Gillian Robertson. If you look at her win over Poliana Botello and you look at the win over Courtney Casey, the win over Courtney Casey was one where she finished it at 4 minutes and 36 seconds. That was a decision in the bag until she decided to go ahead and go for it. If you watch that fight, she was looking for a TKO. Like, she was in such dominance in that fight that she wanted a knockout win, continued to look for it, and it wasn't until her coach went, Gillian, just submit her. And finally, she took the spot and choked her out. Like, it was that quick. It was that easy. If it had gone on for 30 more seconds, she wins a clear-cut decision. And it's the same thing with Poliana Botello. So I think that she's becoming less and less sub or bust. I know right now that's what she appears to be. I know that's what she was in the past, but I also think that she is becoming a more well-rounded fighter, and I think her grappling is getting better. So I think if she can get Miranda Maverick to the ground, and we know Miranda Maverick is no stranger to going to the ground, once it hits there, I don't know if Maverick's got the offensive wrestling of someone like Talia Santos that can hold Gillian down the whole time. I think the sweeps, the reversals, I think those all come into play here in this spot, and then she might be able to, dominate the positioning. And if she doesn't get a submission, be able to grind out a decision here. So one more path to victory, I think I'm giving her a little bit more credit for, but not a home run spot for sure. I want to see what Miranda Maverick has here. This is a big step up spot for her, and if she succeeds here, this is definitely a good sign for her future career here in the UFC.
Completely agree. Yeah, a lot of great points there, Clint.
It's going to be a good one. All right, James. Moving on, we've got a light heavyweight fight here. Modestas Bukauskas taking on Michal Lord Oleksiejczuk. Oh, this one brings back some bad memories for me, James. One of the biggest bets of my life that I have lost. And of course, those are the ones that all stick out, right? No, actually not against Jimmy Crute, against OSP.
Oh, okay,
that was the one that got me. I know how good Jimmy Crute is. I was very, very hesitant. I did end up firing on Michal Oleksiejczuk against Jimmy Crute, but it wasn't nearly as big of a bet. When he fought OSP, I thought OSP was done. I thought the writing was on the wall. The old man was over the hill. I was ready to write him off, and boy, did he prove us wrong that time. I love this kid. I think he's incredible, and if he can pull everything together, he's got a whole lot of good points, but he's kind of cracking at the seams here for me. He's incredibly fast on the feet, aggressive, lots of movement, likes to cut angles. He rips the body to set up the head strikes, which is something I love. But in his last couple fights, he's shown some gas tank issues, and that was something that I never expected to see from him. He came out so hard that he gassed himself out against OSP, and that led to his doom. And then Jimmy Crute was just good enough on the ground to go ahead and wear him out with the wrestling. This is a different spot, though. Modestas Bukauskas, I actually like this guy, too. The thing is, he has no grappling to speak of. He's good at range control. He circles well. He's got a long 1-2 that he fires right down the pipe. He's pretty fast himself, and he fires off these long leg kicks. The only thing is he drops his hands a lot when he throws, James. He is extremely hittable. He has solid takedown defense, and he's knocked a couple people out with those Travis Brown-style elbows, and he has a really good get-up game. So I think the grappling isn't going to be much of a factor here in this spot. If you look at Oleksiejczuk, 3 of his 4 losses are by submission. They're to these big, strong guys that can wear him out, drag him into deep waters, and then get him to the ground. That's really not Modestas Bukauskas' game plan. He's a striker, too. He likes to stand on the feet and bang. He's got 3 losses, 2 of those coming by way of knockout. I mean, they've got a similar loss here with the loss to Jimmy Crute coming in their last fight. But even back in Cage Warriors, before he got to the UFC, Modestas got a knockout loss there. I think the hand speed of Michal Oleksiejczuk is going to make the difference here. And I lean towards him getting kind of back on track here, finding the chin of Bukauskas, getting a knockout win, and getting right back on track. How do you see this fight playing out?
I'm actually going with the dog here. I like Modestas Bukauskas in this fight for a couple reasons. And you talked about those knockout losses. So yes, the Jimmy Crute one, I think Jimmy Crute's legit. I might even pick him against Anthony Smith when he's fighting him in a few weeks. I'll break down that fight obviously when that comes up. But the thing I look at, that one knockout loss he had to John Redmond was at middleweight. And that's a key thing there, because one of the things that he's talked to me about was how much of a cut that was to 185. And as we all know, Clint, the more you cut down, if you cut a lot of weight, you're more susceptible to the knockout. So I kind of give him a pass for that one. The last fight though, he lost to Jimmy Crute. They both lost to Jimmy Crute actually. So it's one of those interesting things where, he was knocked out by Jimmy Crute, whereas Michal was submitted by him as well. So I think we both know they can't get past Jimmy Crute. We know that for a fact. But his debut was a little bit weird. Obviously the Andreas Michaelanis fight was, remember the whole thing with the cage door where, obviously he fell backwards and then they just called it a TK. It was kind of an odd one, but he was on his way to winning that fight. I think he was just looking a little bit faster here. One of the things also in the last camp that I don't think a lot of people realize is the restrictions with the pandemic in the UK. So Modestas basically told me, I did have a chance to speak to him before this fight. By the way, you can find that on my UFC 260 playlist on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/sports. But he talked about how his last training camp was not ideal. It was a lot of just private sessions, having to do stuff on the down low, whatever. This camp, I know he actually got to train a bit with Leon Edwards, and he had an opportunity to get some better training partners in there this time. And he talked about, just the loss and how, preparation was a really bad issue for him going into that last fight. And of course, maybe the results still would have been the same, but I like the fact that he mentioned that. I think it's going to stay standing. I don't think Modestas is going to try his ground game in this one, although he does have I think he has a win or two by submission here. He actually has back-to-back submission wins back in 2018. But I think in general, I think Modestas is actually the more well-rounded guy. I think the thing with Oleksiejczuk, I remember when he fought Khalil Roundtree, I was like, this guy looks legit. But it seems like after that, and I know he had 2 wins after that, but look at the competition there, just not exactly, amazing. John Vellante, Ante Gulov. I mean, those are guys that are not really UFC mainstays. And when he did fight people that were pretty good, like OSP and Jimmy Crute, he totally got flatlined in those ones. So I like Modestas in this fight. I think there's some value here as the underdog. I'm seeing right now on my line right now anyways, anywhere from, what are we looking at here as far as the betting lines? He's like a plus 130.
Plus 130.
I think there's some value there. I think there might even be some value there on the knockout prop as well, in case he can go out there and, take 2 to tango, so to speak. But I like him here with the dog money. I think he bounces back in a big way, and I think he makes a statement in this fight and proven that he is a pretty legit guy, and that last fight was a bit of a hiccup. So I'm going Modestas Bukauskas with the upset.
Nice. Okay. A little bit of disagreement here on the show. I like it. So I'm thinking, though, as much as I think Oleksiejczuk might be the better side here for myself, I'm probably not going to bet him. I've been burned by this kid laying big price tags on him more than once, and I would just feel stupid going right back to the well and trying it again. Honestly, the spot I'm looking at here, James, from a betting perspective, is the under. They've got it set at 2.5, and these are some pretty decent-sized dudes with some big power. We know they both like to throw down with speed, and I don't expect either of them to be grappling much. I think someone gets clipped and knocked out in this fight, and that completely resolves us of figuring out who that's going to be, as long as it gets done inside the distance. Right now, the total set, it looks like you can get between minus 120 and minus 145 for the under 2.5, plus 100, plus 115 for the over 2.5. I think somebody gets finished here, man. I might just play the violence.
Yeah, no, great call on that one. I actually really like that play. Kind of like last time when we had the over in the, was it the Charles Rosa and the Derek Minner fight? Remember that ended up going the distance. Yep. So there you go.
I like it. All right. So we disagree on the side, but we both agree on the total. I want to go ahead and shout out the chat. We've got 300 live viewers with us here tonight. Thank you all so much for spending the evening with us. And DFS in the house, what's up, buddy? Saying we need to keep that under a secret because not everyone has access to it. And yeah, unfortunately, I blew the lid off that one. Sorry, buddy. Everybody sit tight. Don't hammer the under so DFS can get a half-decent number before everybody crushes it. That's probably a play that I will lock in once it's available at a lot of books and stuff. Those totals don't come out till later in the week. So everybody keep that in mind, but I'm thinking I like the under on that one. Next up, we've got a welterweight fight. Jared Night Train Gooden taking on Abubakar Nurmagomedov. I got through that without stumbling, but the once.
Good work.
Jared Gooden coming back 17-5. Abu is 15-3. And right now, Nurmagomedov is one of the biggest favorites on the card at minus 235. That sounds crazy considering we've been seeing minus 500, minus 700 favorites the last couple of weeks. He's one of the biggest favorites on the card at just minus 235. Jared Gooden, man, he came out and really showed his stuff in his last fight. I mean, unless I'm mistaken, he wasn't short notice, but he wasn't a guy that I was expecting to look all that great against UFC caliber competition. And he really, really did a good job of accounting for himself there. And Abubakar, see, now I'm messing up the name. I get into the breakdown and I start messing up the other stuff that requires a little brain activity. This is a guy that on the other side, I've kind of been a little bit disappointed with so far in the UFC. So I'm a little miffed on this fight. James, why don't I let you lead this one off? How do you feel about this one?
This is another tricky spot here, Clint. Jared Gooden, obviously, a little bit bigger in this fight. He's 6 feet tall with a 76-inch reach. His opponent, 5'11" with a 73-inch reach. I'm going to throw this out here. I might be a little off on this, but I have a feeling the line is so different with Nurmagomedov being such a favorite because of his last name. I kind of feel that way because have people been watching this guy? He hasn't been really lighting the world on fire. Lost the debut to David Zawada. Had a draw against Bojan Veljković, the former UFC fighter in PFL. Hasn't really been lighting the world on fire, so to speak. He had a nice winning streak in World Series of Fighting, but these are all regional guys. They're not anything like a step up, so to speak. So I don't know if this guy's as good as advertised. Like he's like what, a 3-1 favorite. I think I'm looking on the betting lines right now here. I mean, he's minus 235. I'm seeing that. I guess that's okay, but I don't know. I want people to be a little bit careful, in this fight because Jared Gooden, while he did lose his UFC debut, it was against a guy in Alan Jouban who's very difficult to finish, very difficult to put out. Typically, Jouban's fights do go the distance, so you're not going to put out an Alan Jouban early on.
And that was a war too.
It was, and I think if anything, his stock went up. It wasn't short notice, but he did have his fight switched up. If you remember, he was supposed to fight Dwight Grant earlier in the year. Got the injury. Still didn't get an answer from him when I interviewed him before the Jouban fight about what that injury was, but he was kind of keeping it top secret. But it's interesting. The thing that obviously you have to look at here as well is that Gooden's only 27, so we really haven't seen him in his prime yet. The one concern I do have with Jared Gooden as well, and I kind of talked about it there with Nurmagomedov, is the level of competition, man. The guy he beat to get in the UFC was 8-4. The guy he beat before that was 3-13. The guy he beat before that was 4-1. The losses, Mike Graves, Bruno Oliveira, these are guys sort of on the fringe of the UFC, and he lost to Jouban. I think despite losing, Jouban was probably his best shot or best performance, I'd say, to date here. So this is another one where I kind of worry a bit about who's going to end up pulling it off here. Nurmagomedov, again, does have a pretty good submission game. He's got a good stand-up as well. I don't think he's going to put out a Jared Gooden. Jared Gooden has been finished before, but I want to say Gooden has a little bit more power in terms of that. I could see this being a close fight. In fact, I think this fight is probably going the distance. And that's where I kind of get a little bit worried here. I give a slight edge to Nurmagomedov just because despite the fact that I don't think he's beat any world beaters by any means, I don't think Gooden has either. But I worry here in terms of the betting line because I think minus 235 is actually a little steep for Nurmagomedov because again, I don't think this guy is anything to write home about. And I think Gooden's a guy that could spoil the party here. So the pick's going to be Nurmagomedov. If you want to lay the money on Gooden, see, I won't even do that. I honestly just want to stay away from this one. I'm a little scared here because Gooden as well, even though he had, like I said, had a good showing against Alan Jouban, I'm not sold on him as a prospect yet with what he did on the regional scene. So the pick's going to be Nurmagomedov. I'm going to stay away from this one, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, James, I couldn't agree with you more, man. I've got that bounce back mentality. I'm coming off a really bad loss last week, and I'm looking to find spots to put my money where I can get some of that back, and I'm having a hard time. This is a really, really tough card from a betting perspective, and you nailed it on this fight. I lean with Abubakar Nurmagomedov, but I do not want to pay this price on it. You look at the guy, and he's not as good as Khabib. He tries to do the same type of things, and he's got this nice long power striking, which I do enjoy. He hits really hard at reach, but I don't think Jared Gooden is going to be a guy that's going to get caught by that. We saw what he was able to do with Alan Jouban, and Jouban's a slick striker, man. Jared Gooden also has shown off he's got a pretty damn good chin on him. His only loss via TKO was against Bruno Oliveira, And that was a fight, if I remember correctly, that he took on short notice up a weight class. So that's a spot that realistically we shouldn't hold that too much against him. The guy's got a good chin. He's shown that in all of his fights. But the level of competition really concerns me as well. The thing with Abubakar, though, is he's got 2 losses recently by submission. For being this wrestling savant, he gives up these bad positions, and he is more than okay with tapping, apparently. Jared Gooden, if nobody knows, has a really sneaky good ground game. I think he's a brown belt. I need to double check the credentials, but I'm pretty sure that he's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. So even if Abubakar does get Jared Gooden to the floor, he's not necessarily safe. So it's another spot where I lean with the favorite, but there's a lot of ways I could see Jared Gooden pulling this upset. I'm going to say Abubakar wins the fight. I'm not going anywhere near this thing from a betting perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So we agree on that then. That makes a lot of sense. So
absolutely. Yeah. That one's maybe on a card that's full of sketchy fights. That's maybe the sketchiest one of all of them, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a couple, like I said, just warning the people out there. I don't think they're clear cuts winners in any of them. It's that one. It's the Abu fight as well with Marc-Andre Barriault. Yeah, there's a few on here, and there's actually one we're going to be talking about later as well that I'm kind of like, we'll see. But yeah, that's what I think.
I mean, speaking of, let's segue right into the next fight. Women's strawweight match between Jessica Penne and Hannah Goldy, man. When I started doing my tape study for this one and getting into breaking everything down, the very first thing I thought to do was I tweeted the gif from Star Wars where Obi-Wan goes, "Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long, long time." I forgot about Jessica Penne, man. I thought she retired. She's been gone so long. I didn't even remember her being on the roster. I had to go back and completely relearn everything about her to have any opinion on this fight, man. Hannah Goldy, 5-1, relatively new to the UFC, and honestly, very frustrating to watch. Very frustrating. She is a muscle-bound monster. She's really big for the weight class, but she has this weird outside striking style. She likes to throw this funky little kick out that doesn't really do any damage, and she wants to stay away from her opponent and not really engage. When they get too close, she'll kind of unload with a couple body shots and then reset at range immediately. It reminds me of Elias Theodorou, man. Like, it's not fun to watch. It's not entertaining. And it doesn't really do all that well on the judges' scorecards either, because everyone knows you're not landing any damage at all. I'm not sure what to make of Hannah Goldy. And then Jessica Penne, she hasn't fought since 2017. When she was fighting, she was on a 3-fight losing streak, but she's another one of these fighters that we talk about with the level of competition. She was fighting some of the best women in the sport when she left. She fought Jessica Andrade. She fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Like, that's a pretty high level of competition before taking that break. But I hate backing fighters off of a long layoff. And right now she's training with Angela Hill. That's a good sign. I like seeing that. She's tall. She's plodding forward, but she's slow, man. She throws a body kick that she does not set up and would be easily counterable, but I don't know if Hannah Goldy's capable of countering it. I'll be honest, I'm not sure either of these fighters are UFC caliber, James. I don't like this fight at all. I don't think it's going to be good unless one of them shows up and shows us a new wrinkle in their game that we're not expecting. And of all the fights we've talked about not going near, this one is by far the most that I just want no part of. Jessica Penne is the slight underdog, is the way that I'll lean, just because of the level of competition and how unimpressed I am with Hannah Goldy's skill set. But again, I'm going to go get a drink during this one. I'm probably not even going to end up watching it.
You're totally right. It is such a crazy fight, and with all the variables going in, we didn't even talk about this. And you're not supposed to talk about a woman's age, but we will today. I mean, Jessica Penne's 38 years old. I mean, that's crazy. I too thought she was retired. So if people don't remember, she had this big issue with USADA. That's why she hasn't fought forever. There was lawsuits. There was all this stuff going on. They said she was using, she wasn't, whatever. I don't know. But she hasn't fought, like you said, since April 2017. That's a huge this isn't Dominic Cruz coming back. Okay. This is, a strawweight fighter who, yes, she has fought better competition, but she also lost to Danielle Taylor in her last fight. Danielle Taylor is not even in the UFC anymore. So I don't know what to put into that as well either. So it's very interesting, very frustrating as well. So Hannah Goldy, I did have a chance to speak to her before the fight. And I asked her, I said, why have you been out for so long? Right? Because she fought Miranda Granger in her debut. And she basically said that it was a case of her overtraining. She kept getting injured a lot, Clint. So this was why she would, have a fight lined up. She was supposed to fight Loma last year in February, ended up getting injured, and then COVID hit and whatever. So she's, really fixed a lot of that from what she told me in the interview. Just said that, basically she's got a whole new strength and conditioning program. She's got a bunch of new things that she's working. She's actually switched up her training a bit. She's actually doing a bit of training with Gillian Robertson as well, who's on this card. So I think that's a good move on top of that. And here's an interesting thing that she touched on in the interview, and I'm going to talk about it here, is that if you remember, she won on Contender Series over Callie Robbins. It wasn't a great fight. It was, she won, but it wasn't the type of fight that I think would have got you the contract. And she didn't get the contract. Do you remember why she didn't get the contract? Dana White said, we think you need more experience. Well, that's funny because she fought in that fight in June. By August, she was signed to the UFC without having a single fight in between there because they needed someone on short notice.
They need bodies.
So her and Miranda Granger fought on short notice. Now that Miranda Granger loss looks even worse now because Miranda, I think, is on a 2-fight skid. She had that really bad fight with Ashley Yoder, if you remember, in her last fight. So that's not a bad, good loss to have, but it was on short notice. And again, she was, the UFC debut. There's a lot of variables that go into that, but kind of what I was getting at is that I think we may see a more improved Hannah Goldy in this fight. Just she talked about, and that's what I was going to get to. I kind of missed my point there, but she said that, the fact that she was off for so long actually helped her learn more, helped her build up her skill set, because she also felt like she wasn't necessarily UFC ready, but she feels like now with the time she's had off, she has been able to do that. Is that enough to beat a Jessica Penne? I have no idea. No one does. The only people who know that are in Hannah Goldy's camp. And also, I don't even think they know, because what type of Jessica Penne are we going to get at 38 years old, having not fought since April of 2017? So I am a little surprised to see Goldy as the favorite. I guess it's just because she's been more active and she's younger. I mean, Goldy is 27, I think, 28 years old. So there is some reason to like her in this fight. I think probably the safest bet in this one is just take the fight goes the distance prop. I know when people get so pissed when I say the fight's going to go the distance, but look at the stats here. Most women's fights do go the full 5 rounds. You look at Hannah Goldy, her last finish in a fight was in her second pro fight in 2018. Jessica Penne, her last finish was 2014 on Tough. So you get what I'm saying here. I think that might be the best bet in this fight, is just take the fight goes the distance prop, especially since both of them are dire need of a win. If Jessica Penne loses, she's out. If Hannah Goldy loses, she might be out too. She might have to go back to the regional scene. So I think the best bet here is the decision prop. I'm going to have a quick look at that right now and see what that is. Maybe
260.
Not great, but I really don't think there's going to be a finish here. I think even that, but yeah, I guess like you said, not much value there as well. So I'm going to take Hannah Goldy just because she has been more active, and that usually leads to, something that, and maybe she has improved. I'll bank on that, I guess, but I would personally stay away from this fight from a betting perspective because there's just too many question marks going in.
I completely agree, man. And I like to make a case for the unders in these spots, because with women's fight, the wides get so dang wide. But I don't know how either of these women is supposed to finish this fight. I do think that the fight going to the distance is really the only way that you can look here. And if you want to take that, bridge jump price there and lay minus 260 on it, you go straight ahead. Like I said, it's one that's going to be fireball and popcorn for me. There's no better spot to get up, stretch your legs, use the bathroom, take a drink. We've got a hot take here, though, that Penne subs her. So there you go. I will props to you if that happens, because I don't see much of that going on either way. But with 3 years off, maybe if Penne's been training, staying active this whole time, you see these fighters that get older, and sometimes the time off actually helps. They let their body heal up. They let their body rest. They're not training for the next fight coming up. But all this stuff is speculative. You know what I mean? We don't know if Hannah Goldy has made improvements and maybe she's better. We don't know if Penne is now, a younger version of herself because she took the time off to rest and relax. We're just going to have to wait and see. And it's not something that we want to put our money on, just kind of throwing a dart at the wall. So definite pass here for me.
Yeah, no, completely agree. This is a trap if I've ever seen one.
All right. And it's not often I have to do this. I got to break away for a second. Just ask the chat to simmer down just a little bit, guys. We got a couple people in the chat going back and forth. You know who you are. Do me a favor. Just chill. We're all about positivity here. Winning and losing and betting. It happens. We all get heated. I know. We don't need to get into a pissing contest over the person's record and what. Let's just everybody chill out. Let's talk some fights. Let's have a good time. I want to go ahead and shout out my other sponsor here. We've got GoatCapitalSports.com. I talk about it all the time that I only do MMA for you guys here. Every once in a while, I'll throw some degenerate NHL action for fun. But if you want a proven bettor, someone who can help you out with basketball, baseball, football. We've got March Madness going on right now. Goat Capital Sports has been killing it. Give them a follow at @GoatCapital_ on Twitter. Let them know Clint sent you. They'll be able to point you in the right direction. We've got the final fight of the preliminary card closing this thing out here. William Knight taking on Alonzo Menifield. Another one of these fights that we have talked about a couple times. It's been postponed. It's been pushed back. And now we get to hopefully see it on Saturday. I would like to get by this one, man. These guys are almost mirror images of each other. I mean, absolute freaks of nature, these two. On the scale, it's hard to match what these two bring to the table. Just muscle-bound monsters, 9-1 versus 9-2. Alonzo Menifield, we know his weakness. He's got big power, and that's about it. If you drag this guy out, he gasses out, he slows down bad, he can get out grappled, he doesn't have much left, but we've seen what he can do in just 1 or 2 shots. It doesn't take a lot for him to put anybody away. William Knight, 9-1, he is a guy that has surprisingly good cardio for his physique. He seems to gas out, but he's able to kind of Yoel Romero style explode and reload. He manages to dig deep later in the fight, and he's got more gas than you give him credit for. Something I really like, and a fellow nerd, so I like William Knight. He's a geek. He's always posting, Dragon Ball Z stuff and video game stuff. I like the guy. I got a soft spot for him. But when it comes to the way the fight plays out, I mean, you got to think Alonzo Menifield maybe catches William Knight early, or William Knight is going to pin Menifield against the fence, get the blood pumping, make him tired, and then drag this thing late. Another one, man, that's really hard to pick. It's a coin flip price for a reason. It's -110 on either side, and you're just picking, do you think this guy's better than the other one? We're not sure. We really have nothing to base it off of. Alonzo Menifield, slightly better level of competition, but he did not fare well against that level of competition, and it's not like he's got a bunch more experience than William Knight does. They've got the same exact record. The spot I'm kind of eyeballing is maybe the over 1.5, that maybe William Knight is able to survive and stretch this thing late, but I almost feel like that's tempting fate a little bit too, because Knight's one loss is by knockout. James, talk to me about yet another confusing fight that's hard to bet.
I have a little bit more of a lean on this one. I like Menifield a lot in this one. A little bit bigger in the matchup, comes from a much better camp at Fortis MMA. He's in there with Jeff Neal and a lot of the other really good, talented fighters over there. And yeah, Menifield, it's been a rough stretch. That Devin Clark fight just completely outclassed in that one. And Devin Clark doesn't do that to anyone. So that was concerning for sure. I mean, obviously it was just a case of where Menifield just couldn't get his footing in that fight. Clark went out there and pretty much just dominated him the entire 3 rounds. The OSP fight was a bit weird because I thought he won that first round, but that second round, obviously he got clipped. He got knocked out, first knockout loss of his career. So it's a little bit interesting. And, again, like we saw in the Clark fight, if he can't finish you early, it doesn't end up pretty well, but he's got to have fixed that. You would think at this point, in his career, just seeing what's going on here. William Knight, look, I'm a little bit, worried about him as well because, contender series, got the win over Cody Brundage, but that was a fight I remember early on where Brundage actually looked pretty good, and then it was just Knight getting him in a bad position and finished him in the first round. I know it was a first round finish. You don't have to tell me that. I know that he won, but it's just I'm putting that in anyways. The Alexa Khama fight, it was just sort of a case of him like out-muscling Khama, and Khama's also a guy that didn't have a lot of experience when he got signed to the UFC. He got that Stipe Miocic rub, because he's teammates with him. I think that's part of the reason he got signed as well, because Khama, I think, only had, 6 fights leading into the matchup. So what I'm basing it off of is that, I think Menifield is good. I think he just needs to tweak a few things. I think people forget they're almost the same age. William Knight's 32, Menifield's 33. So it's not like it's a case of, Knight being a lot younger and still has more to prove. What you see with William Knight is what you get. And also the thing that concerns me about Knight is there's a couple fights back in 2019 where he got knocked out by Ncheki, I know I'm butchering that, the contender series guy, who I'm talking about. He got knocked out in the first round by him. Nchukwi, yeah, exactly. So that's a bit concerning as well. So it's one thing to get knocked out by OSP, which I know OSP is not really known for that, but it's another thing to get knocked out by a guy with only a couple fights. So I think Menifield bounces back in a big way here. I think he takes control. I think he's more proven and he's got more UFC experience, which I like. And let's not forget either, he's got a pretty good win over Paul Craig. I know Paul Craig typically submits you or he ends up losing a decision, but for him to knock him out, very impressive. So I'm going Menifield here. The question is, does he finish William Knight? I don't know. I can't answer that. And, you were talking about the, the over or whatever it was. I think it was the over or the under. I can't remember, but
over
like,
1.5,
honestly, yeah, I'm just kind of staying away from that in general, because I don't know how this is going to end. This could end in a finish, but I like Menifield here. I don't know what it is. I feel like this is a spot where he's, maybe people are writing him off a bit because of 2 straight losses, but it's now or never, because if Menifield loses this, he's out. He's 33. The chances of him getting back in the UFC are very slim, even at light heavyweight. I think he knows what's on the line here. If Knight loses, he'll live to see another day. But with Menifield, I think there's a little bit more urgency for him to go out there and get the win. So I'm taking him. I'm taking the Fortis guy.
That's actually a really good point, James. And I mean, we saw that just last week, or just this over the weekend with Bruno Silva, right? You get these fighters that are experienced, that are good, that haven't shown the best of themselves, and they get their backs against the wall and they show up because they have to, and that's something that maybe we don't talk about enough. So good, valid points there. I like it. I've got to shout out our guy Ryan Schmidt in the chat because he just killed it here with the price is Knight.
I like it.
I like it. I grew up watching The Price is Right, so excellent play on words, my friend. You get your moment there. You do you. I can kind of see what you're saying, James. I don't hate it, and honestly, so a couple of counterpoints. The only thing for me is the Paul Craig fight. I had a bet on Paul Craig that night, actually. And I thought Paul Craig was far and away going to be able to do what he needed to do to win that fight. He threw the same stupid-ass spinning back fist 3 times in a row and gave just a wide-open door for Alonzo Menifield to knock him out. If he had played that just ever so slightly smarter, I still think Paul Craig wins that fight in a rematch. I would probably bet him again, and it'd be an even bigger line, so I'd be more than happy to do that. So a little asterisk next to that win for me, because I feel like it was more about what Craig did wrong and less about what Alonzo Menifield did right. But I do have to give him credit in the Devin Clark fight. Like you mentioned, stylistically speaking, William Knight just kind of rips people to the ground. I mean, he did just overpower Oleksiejczuk, and he did just overpower Cody Brundage. He's not going to be able to overpower Alonzo Menifield. If he thinks he's just going to come in, bully this guy against the fence, and then rip him to the floor, I don't want to doubt how strong Knight is, because he's a beefcake for sure, but I don't think he's that strong. Alonzo Menifield is just as big and powerful, and the reason Devin Clark was able to survive that fight was because of his wrestling technique, because of his good, solid, technical takedowns, good head positioning. He was able to weather the storm and survive. I don't know if William Knight is that caliber of a wrestler. So, James, you might be onto something. I think after kind of talking that out, I'm with you. I'll slightly lean to Alonzo Menifield. I don't know if I've got the cojones to get to the betting window on it, but I'll ever so slightly lean Alonzo Menifield with you here on this one.
There you go. It won you over.
You did. You got me. All right. We are moving on over to the main card, folks. This is the Diehard MMA podcast. You are watching this live only on odds.com. Do us a favor. Make sure you smash that like button. Give the show a share. I am chilling with my guy, James Lynch, the best MMA interviewer in the business. Make sure you give him a follow over on Twitter. And let's talk about these last 4 fights. Lightweight fight, Jamie Mullarkey taking on Khama Worthy. Another one we're maybe a little bit concerned about a COVID cancellation. Jamie Mullarkey has been training with the City Kickboxing boys, hanging out with Alexander Volkanovski, and we know a couple of them have popped for COVID. We haven't heard anything yet on this one, but there's always that chance. Someone in the corner, maybe he's got it. We just don't know. So hang on to your butts. This one might end up getting pulled too. Mullarkey's 12-4. Khama Worthy is 16-7. And like I said, Mullarkey's been training at City Kickboxing, and man, I'm just not ready to write these guys off. I think they're better than they've shown. They're on a bit of a rough skid. We see these ups and downs with gyms. They can't just win all the time constantly. What this guy brings to the table is a good, hard jab, solid head movement, nice leg kicks. He is willing to stand in the pocket and trade until somebody falls, and that's maybe his downside sometimes. But training at City Kickboxing with guys like Volkanovski, with guys like Brad Riddell, who is his first fight and loss in the UFC, took that guy all 15 minutes and gave him hell the whole time too. Really entertaining back and forth fight. Had a close fight with Faraz Ziem. That one could have gone either way as well. This guy is solid with the grappling as well. He shoots takedowns, excellent timing, looks to take the back extremely quickly. He human backpacks people. He's got that rear naked choke threat. And then he's taking on my guy, Khama. Everybody knows I'm a Khama fan. I called the upset on Luis Pena. And since then, we've all kind of had to cool our jets. He pulls into the UFC. He upsets Luis Pena on short notice. And his next fight, he's a favorite over Azaitar. We knew better than that. We knew that was an overreaction. We took Azaitar there in that fight and crushed that spot. Now here he is, established as a favorite against Jamie Mullarkey. And I'll be honest, James, I almost feel like we should maybe take the dog here again. Khama, as much as I like the guy, he's long, he's strong, he's got good solid striking, he's got decent grappling. Well, one of his big selling points is he's never been knocked out at 155. He showed chin issues at 145. Now, I know Azaitar hits like almost nobody else does at 155. The guy's got crazy power. But now Khama-Worthy's been cracked at 155 and taken out. So we've got to worry about those chin issues. Mullarkey, if anything, can crack. This guy's got some big-time power, and mixing in the grappling and the wrestling, I think he could cause Khama-Worthy some problems. In that Luis Pena fight, Pena had a couple of different opportunities to take his back. He couldn't quite do anything with it, but we know that's kind of the story with Luis Pena. He's able to get those control positions, but he's not really much of a finisher. I feel like Mullarkey might be the slightly better fighter overall, and maybe the wrong guy's favorite here, James. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I sort of have concerns of Worthy as being the favorite in this fight. And you talked about him getting knocked out by Azaitar. I mean, Azaitar was undefeated. I think, a lot of people are very high on him. That's probably the reason why he's back in the UFC. I think with that whole, potatoes thing, which, by the way, go watch on my channel. I have that clip of Khama-Worthy talking about that whole thing. And I said, well, do you think it was potatoes? And he interrupted me immediately. He goes, it was steroids. It's definitely steroids. And it was just, it was so funny. It was a great clip. BJ Penn ended up picking it up, which I thought was pretty funny. Yeah, it's tough, man. Like I remember, I'll tell you guys a little bit of a story here, and I can't remember if I talked about this last time, but there was a point where Khama-Worthy was going to retire in 2017. If you remember, he fought at featherweight. There was a point where he was knocked out in I think 4 of his last 6 fights, including to Kyle Nelson, the same Kyle Nelson who's in the UFC, who's not known as a knockout artist. I was at that fight. It was in Toronto. It was on the regional scene. I was front row. Khama-Worthy got knocked out in a minute. It was crazy. Like, it was just one of those things. You're like, how the heck, like, did Kyle Nelson knock this guy out? And I remember at that point, they're like, forget it. But then he moved up to lightweight, went on a nice winning streak. Fought Devontae Smith in his debut, another fight I was at, and I remember thinking, there's no way Khama-Worthy's going to win this fight. Devontae Smith's going to knock his ass out, and the opposite happened, right? And Devontae had, the switch up an opponent, and I think he talked about it too. He was sort of messed in his head that he had to fight a former teammate. They used to train together in Pittsburgh, so that was something as well. So I kind of feel like that wins a little bit iffy, and then also the Pena win as well, where Pena was winning that fight, if I remember, and then it was a comeback win for Worthy in that one. So
yes,
I don't know like what type of Worthy we're going to get in this matchup. I understand him being the favorite. I mean, he's got more experience. He has some advantages in this. He is 34 years old, so he's a little bit older than his opponent. I mean, Mullarkey's only 26. I can't take Mullarkey here just because I feel like there's times when, like, especially that last fight, I thought that's one he should have won. He didn't. I think, there's, I kind of like a couple of the fights in this card. I think there's a lot of question marks on some of these fighters as well. So I'm going to give a slight edge to Worthy. Does he finish Mullarkey? Probably not. I mean, Brad Riddell couldn't finish him, right? I mean, Volkanovski finished him, but that was a different weight class, if I'm not mistaken. Or was that lightweight? Let me double check here. That was a featherweight. Yeah. So I don't know, but I'm gonna take Worthy here. Just has a little bit more experience. I think he has enough to get it done, but I do sort of agree with you as well as far as the the bet in this fight, as far as Mullarkey being the dog and having some value there. I could see that as well, but too many variables in this one. I don't have a good read on this fight, I'll be honest.
Okay, fair enough. And, nothing at all wrong with that. If we just want to touch on the total for a second, they've got this one set at 1.5. Over is all the way to -170. Under is +140. I'm not a huge fan of taking under 1.5s, and Mullarkey's proven, if nothing else, the dude is durable. I feel like that's a half decent over spot. I don't like that price tag necessarily, but I do think this fight probably goes a little bit later. If you remember the last fight, not the last fight, but the one before that, I guess, Mullarkey taking on Brad Riddell. Man, they were throwing hammers. They were going to war at the end of that fight, and neither guy dropped. Like, both them wobbled a little bit, both them recovered and stayed in it and hung around. If he goes to war like that with Khama-Worthy, he could go to sleep. Khama-Worthy's got some big, scary power at 155, and I don't think that's a good choice. But I think that if Jamie Mullarkey sticks to his usual game plan of mixing in the grappling, if he pulls out the striking of Khama worthy and then changes levels on him, I think this has got Mullarkey by decision all day written all over it.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's an interesting fight. It's going to be competitive for sure, and I think the odds are sort of indicating that just by looking at what we got right now.
This card, man, it's got me twisted. The whole damn thing.
I know we picked an interesting card for sure. So.
All right, man. Bantamweight fight coming up next. The long-awaited return of Sugar Sean O'Malley. 12-1, coming off the most disappointing fight any of us could have asked for. One of the UFC's hottest prospects bouncing back here. Taking on Thomas Almeida, 22-4. Now, Sean O'Malley, I don't need to tell you all, he's got great precision striking from the outside. The dude's constant movement, cunning angles, spinning kicks, big power in his hands and his legs. This guy can do it all. He's got a 2-inch reach advantage. And I still have questions, James. I still have questions about that fight with Chito Vera. If you ask me, he rolled his ankle. Everyone talks about how it was a targeted calf attack from Chito Vera. And I went back and I watched, man, he didn't have any problems moving on that leg. And then he takes a step forward, his foot kind of rolls, and that's the moment that he starts having trouble. I don't think it was the assault of Chito Vera that did that to his legs. I don't think Sean O'Malley has weak ankles. I think he rolled his leg. Like, I think he had a freak accident in the cage that night. And Thomas Almeida on the flip side of this thing, key point is he attacks the legs. This guy does go after the leg kicks. It's a big part of his offense. He's got a strong counter left, but he blitzes forward and he drops his hands. James, the UFC is trying to get Sean O'Malley back on track. They watched Thomas Almeida's last fight and they went, oh, you can hit this guy. Let's give him Sugar Sean O'Malley. And on top of that, O'Malley has been out for a long, long time. Thomas Almeida just fought. This guy's hopping right back in there after a really tough back-and-forth war against Jonathan Martinez back in October. And when you're talking about someone who has been knocked out a couple times, someone who may not be as durable as we once thought they would be in Thomas Almeida, you need that time to let your body recover. You need that time to let your chin recover. And he's not getting that here. He's only got 5-6 months between fights, and Sean O'Malley hits harder than anybody I think he's fought, except maybe Ron. Well, he's fought Rob Font and Cody Garbrandt. That might be a little strong. We're in the same ballpark there. But Sean O'Malley's reach and accuracy, I think, is going to be a problem, and I think he's going to clip Thomas Almeida while he's blitzing in, man. I've got O'Malley, and I think he wins by devastating knockout.
Yeah, see, I have a different feel on this fight a little bit. I think the odds are a little high on O'Malley here. I'm not as sold on him. I think, again, whether he was going to lose to Chito Vera or not, if the ankle roll happened, I don't know. I remember breaking down that fight and being like, you guys are crazy that, everyone's like, he's going to knock out Chito Vera in the first round. Have you watched Chito Vera fight? This guy is tough to finish. That's not going to happen in this matchup. Yeah. And sure enough, it went the other way. So I kind of feel like, even though he's not like a crazy favorite, like usually O'Malley's like a plus or minus 700 or something crazy like that. Even
he's only 3 this time.
Yeah, he's only 3 this time. I mean, the fights before that, I think actually he was only a 2-1 favorite against Chito Vera. But you get what I'm saying. He was like a minus 400 against Wineland. He was a minus 350 against Quinones, which those were fights set up for him. The thing that concerns me a bit, Clint, is that Almeida's fought really good guys. Like even the Martinez fight, that was a switch up, right? He was supposed to fight Alejandro Perez. He came off that big layoff. He hadn't fought since 2018. I almost give him a pass in that fight because you remember he had the eye injury. He was out for a while. He didn't know when he was coming back. To get your opponent switched up and you've got the big layoff, that's a big hill to overcome here. And Jonathan Martinez is a pretty sneaky guy in general, so I don't necessarily hold that against him. And if you look at the losses before that, Rob Font, Jimmy Rivera, and Cody Garbrandt, I mean, you're talking about, really good guys in that division. Much better competition than what O'Malley's fought, to be honest. And that's the thing with O'Malley. He's looked great and he's done everything he's supposed to do, but he's finished Eddie Wineland, who's probably out of the UFC now. You've got Quinones, who's probably out of the UFC. Sukumtan and Tyron Ware, both out of the UFC. I feel like it's a case where I feel like O'Malley, in some regards, gets a little bit overrated. I think that's come down a bit after him losing his last fight. But I do warn people here that I don't think it's going to be a slam dunk. I've already seen people talk about how O'Malley's a lock on this card. I don't agree. I think Almeida is, the UFC wants to get rid of Almeida. I'm 100% agreeing there. They gave him, that's why he fought Garbrandt at the time. It was like, who's the better prospect? Garbrandt won. He went on to win the title, right? And then, of course, what happened with Almeida, he took a big free fall, lost to Rivera, lost to Rob Font. Now it was lost to Martinez. This is do or die for Almeida, but I also don't know if O'Malley can knock him out. I don't. I mean, it's one thing for an Eddie Wineland to get knocked out or Quinones to get knocked out, but Almeida, yes, he got knocked out by Rob Font and Garbrandt, but we've seen those guys win by knockout. Garbrandt won his last fight by knockout, so did Rob Font. So it's not like, he's a guy that's has chin issues or anything. I think it's just him fighting superior strikers here. So I do think O'Malley's going to end up winning this. With all that said, Clint, I just don't think it's as much of a slam dunk as people are suggesting. I think this could bot where Almeida surprises and maybe even potentially wins this fight. So I want to warn people about this one. Minus, 310 or whatever O'Malley is right now. I think that tweet 320, actually, I'm looking at it right now. That's too steep. I think Almeida's got a little bit more left than what people think. He's still only 29 years old. He's just under 30. Give him a full camp, the right opponent, still trains with Charles Oliveira. Like, that's got to help you out a little bit. I think we'll see a much better fight. By the way, for what it's worth, because I obviously know this more than anyone else, both guys refusing to do media ahead of this fight. You'll notice no interviews with O'Malley, no interviews with Almeida. I think they'll do the UFC stuff this week. But outside of that, I find that interesting. Both of them very zoned in, and both of them know they need the win here. So take that for what it's worth. But I'll pick O'Malley, but I'm staying away from this completely. I don't think there's value. Even O'Malley inside the distance, I thought was like minus 105. I don't know if he finishes Thomas Almeida in this fight. I really don't. Because Jonathan Martinez can finish guys, and again, Rob Font and Rivera and Garbrandt are finishers as well. But I don't know if O'Malley will do it here. Thomas Almeida is probably his second toughest opponent, Chito Vera being the toughest. That's how I feel.
Okay. I can absolutely respect that opinion, James. And as much as I do think that Sean O'Malley wins this fight, gets back on track, I hate the minus 320 price tag too. Like you said, he was a 2.5 to 1 favorite over Chito Vera in his last fight, shit the bed, and now we turn around, we're supposed to lay $3 on him again. I think he wins the fight, but I don't want to pay that. And the only way I could look at betting this fight would be maybe taking the KO prop. I don't see Sean O'Malley submitting a guy like Almeida, who's never been submitted before. The KO prop, believe it or not, First Look is an offshore book. Most people aren't going to have access to it, but it's plus 150. That doesn't sound bad to me. If you want to play Sean O'Malley, by the time we have access to that, it's probably going to get beat to hell. You get plus 110 or plus 105, something like that. O'Malley by knockout, maybe that's the way that you look. The other way to go maybe is the under 2.5. They've got it at minus 150, and we've seen what happens to Sean O'Malley when he's not on the right side of fights. If Almeida comes in guns blazing, if he uses those leg kicks, if there is a problem with Sean O'Malley's ankles, Almeida's going to find it. And in that case, Almeida probably gets the finish. The dude's got 17 of his 22 wins by knockout. So maybe just another spot to bet the violence rather than picking a side. Because as much as I agree with you, the line is wide, I don't really want to take the dog here.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll just point out, and we sort of talked about the level of competition, like Almeida's got 26 fights, O'Malley's got 13. Like, that is a pretty big gap. If you think how much longer Almeida's been fighting, who he's fighting, like think about it. Of Garbrandt, Rivera, Font, all these guys, and I know he lost a bunch of those fights. Like, those guys are all better than Chito Vera, in my opinion. So it's like,
it's not even close.
Yeah, so that's something to consider here. I do think it's a spot where people might be overlooking Almeida a little bit, but again, the picks O'Malley, I'm throwing that as a warning out there so people aren't like, oh, you're wishy-washy. No, it's not that. It's just I'm warning people about Sean O'Malley. That's all.
I like it, James. I like it. All right, we've got a welterweight co-main event, and one that I find extremely intriguing here, James. We've got Tyron, the chosen one, Woodley, making his, I would call it a glorious return, but it's anything but lately with this guy. 19-6-1, taking on Vicente Luque, who is 19-7-1. To lay it all out here for everybody, Tyron Woodley, this guy just can't find the trigger. He was looking solid as the champion, proved everybody wrong, constantly disrespected. We had value on Tyron Woodley for years. And then he ran into the top three, the new young blood of the division, and he's on a 3-fight losing skid. Kamaru Usman, Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington, and running his mouth the entire time, making us all sick to our stomachs when he can't do anything he talks about doing in the cage. He just doesn't pull the trigger anymore, James. If you look at his last 3 fights, 34 significant strikes versus Usman, 28 strikes against Gilbert Burns, 34 strikes versus Colby Covington. And all three of those were 25-minute main event fights. You only mustered 34 strikes over 25 minutes. Now, I know that's significant strikes, not total strikes, but that's not a recipe for success. Vicente Luque on the other side of this thing is a hurricane. The man comes forward and does nothing but attack. He mixes it up well, goes legs, goes to the head. He's got a big right hand, nasty leg kicks. He's one of the most durable guys I have ever seen, and he takes one to give one. And there is the key for me, James. I want to throw a stat at you here with Vicente Luque. He's got a 64% takedown defense rating. That is not very good. Usually you want people to be around that 70 mark, and I know we're just ever so slightly under that 70 mark, but anytime you dip below 70% takedown defense, you leave an opening for someone who is a good wrestler, like a Tyron Woodley, being able to peel you to the mat. I've got a huge problem here, James. I swore to everybody on the show, I've made a big statement about not fading Vicente Luque anymore. There's something about this guy. He gets hit so often, eventually that chin is going to crack. And I've been backing power punchers against him, trying to capitalize on the moment when it's just too much and he can't take it anymore. And here we are again. Everyone and their mom is on Vicente Luque because of just how bad Tyron Woodley has looked. His stock could not be lower. But need I remind you, he's lost to the literal cream of the crop. The current champion, the number one contender that took the champion to a 5-round war, the hardest fight he's ever been in. And then Gilbert Burns, who until just recently was the number one contender and kind of sliced his way through the division for a title shot. Those are the only 3 guys that have been able to top Tyron Woodley. And you know what? They are all excellent wrestlers, James. They have been able to shut Tyron Woodley's grappling down, and that's made it hard for him to play the game he wants to play. Vicente Luque is going to play right into his hand. Vicente Luque is going to run forward into Tyron Woodley's face. Tyron can win this thing by knockout. Tyron can win this thing by decision if he gets a takedown. I think that Tyron Woodley, this spot is primed for Tyron Woodley to get a win. The only problem, James, is he shot? If you rewind 3 years, I'm going to hammer Tyron Woodley in this spot. I will put so much money, it's not okay on Tyron Woodley in this spot. But after watching him his last 3 fights, I just don't know if he's got it anymore. And that's really the only reason I am having a hard time getting to the window.
If this was 2 fights ago, I might agree with you. The Tyron Woodley, Clint, that you're describing no longer exists. He doesn't exist. In fact, Tyron Woodley's last knockout win was when he won the title over Robbie Lawler back in 2016. I just don't see it happening. I think there's a couple things about this fight. So first off, I did have a chance to speak to Luque before this fight. He's not in Florida training for this fight. He's in Brazil. Part of the reason is he's going to be a dad coming up here right after the fight. So he wanted to be home close to family. So he's been, and I asked him, I said, what's the training been like? He's training with his team back home. They are pushing him. He's still talking to Henry Hooft every day, still talking to Gilbert Burns. So he is sort of getting the type of training he is, but I would have liked him a little bit more had he been at Sanford MMA where he's getting to train with his typical teammates. However, one thing he did mention is that when Gilbert Burns fought Tyron Woodley, who did he use as a training partner to mimic Tyron Woodley? That was Vicente Luque. So I think that plays a role. Not only that, but Usman, I know when he was doing his camp, Luque was used in that camp as well. So he's very familiar with Tyron Woodley. Woodley doesn't have the same thing. It's not like Woodley trains with anyone that's fought Luque or anything. So I think that's a bit of an advantage for Luque there as well. But I was with you a couple fights ago. I remember breaking down the Gilbert Burns fight and being like, look, it's just like he lost 1 fight to Usman. I don't think he's there yet. But what happened in that Burns fight was this, and this is what I took as from my perspective, is I think Woodley had a completely different game plan. And I think that all went out the window when Burns connected early on in the fight and he just threw the game plan away. And Woodley has been the nail in every single one of his last 3 fights. And that if you do that, and Luque's that guy who can do that, he can make he can be the hammer, you can be the nail. When that happens, Woodley's a completely different fighter. And this is not even this has happened even before Woodley was champion. Do you remember when he fought Rory McDonald? Rory completely took Woodley out of his element. Woodley, this explosive guy who knocks people out. Rory completely outclassed him in that fight. There's fights. The Jake Shields fights is another one where, again, if you can attack Woodley and you can get in his face and take him out of his element, he can definitely, falter a bit. And I think that's going to happen here. Not to mention the fact he's 38. Not to mention the fact I heard he's going through a pretty bad divorce or has been. He kind of needs the money. So I do wonder where his motivation is at this point. I liked when he went to Thailand, and I actually liked his chances when he was supposed to fight Leon Edwards back a little while back, but he can't even go to Thailand now because of the pandemic. So I don't even know where he's training right now. I'm assuming it's with Dean Thomas or wherever. I don't know. I didn't get a chance to talk to him. But either way, I think Luque is got this fight in the bag. Let's also not forget that Luque is the only fighter to knock out Belal Muhammad in the first round. That's not easy to do with how durable Belal Muhammad is. So this guy, I feel like in some ways is a little underrated in the weight class. He's got some good wins. He's coming off a nice win over Randy Brown. A little bit more active than Woodley as well. I really like Luque here. I feel very strongly that Luque wins. The thing is, I don't think he finishes Woodley. To me, if a Gilbert Burns and a Colby Covington, Covington did finish him as an injury. If Usman couldn't finish him, if Burns couldn't finish him in 5 rounds, this fight ending inside 3 rounds. I think Luque wins by decision, and you can get that right now for plus 155. I think there's a lot of value there. I don't see Woodley winning this fight because, Clint, I just don't think the Tyron Woodley that we saw that fought Darren Till, the one that fought Stephen Thompson, I don't think that Woodley exists. And outside of one loss that Luque has had to Stephen Thompson recently, he's looked pretty awesome. So I'm taking Vicente Luque, and I feel very strongly he gets it done here on Saturday night.
Okay, James. Okay. I hear you. And just so everybody knows, I had to say my piece. I don't think I'm actually going to bet Tyron Woodley this weekend. I don't think I'm going to, because I do understand that Tyron Woodley doesn't exist anymore. Lynch, he's just like Bigfoot and the big green giant. The Woodley that I'm imagining is a fairy tale at this point. And as much as I wish he were still around for me to make easy money on because he was underrated, I just don't think he's there anymore. If I get even a whiff of the old Tyron, I will take my shot. But I'm gonna be watching his interviews and things like that extremely closely. One of the things I struggle with when it comes to betting, James, is in MMA, spots that look too good to be true usually are. And that's something where I break out my tinfoil cap. I start wondering what I'm missing, because if we're all right, and of course the entire world is with us here, that Tyron Woodley is shot, Vicente Luque is the side, and he can't pull the trigger, why is this line not higher? Why is money right now coming in on Tyron Woodley? Why isn't there more love? Vicente Luque should be minus 400, minus 450. This is the spot where I start to struggle, because I feel like if Tyron Woodley can find just one more, he's taken a big step down in competition here. I think he's got the opportunity to win, but it's a combination of I can't bet Tyron Woodley and I'm not supposed to fade Vicente Luque that I probably shouldn't make any kind of a bet here. Shout out to my guy. It went away. The chat's moving too fast. Kyung Do Chicken. There are no fairy tale endings in MMA. He's using my own line against me, James. That's exactly what I said when we bet Stipe over Daniel Cormier. There's no such thing as a fairy tale ending in MMA, and that's right. Tyron Woodley probably doesn't come back on Saturday. He probably doesn't get that illustrious comeback and gets to ride off into the sunset, because in this sport, we just tend not to see it.
Well, and also I think to answer your question about why the people are hammering the Woodley line, I think it's the reason you mentioned is that he's lost to the 3 top contenders. I think a lot of people are looking at that and saying, oh, hold on a second here. This is a spot where we can get him. Luque's not as good, but I think it's a case of Luque being underrated, if anything. I think, yeah, he lost to Thompson, but that's one loss over how many fights, and he's finishing these guys? I don't know. I think Luque's, I think he's just hitting his stride now. And plus, Dad Luque is incoming. We saw Dad Cerrone. Maybe there's something that. And the other thing you mentioned is, you talked about this earlier, who's Vicente Luque's manager? He's a dominance guy. Favorable match.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Excellent point, James. The dominance guys do not miss. And John, you got to call out the Jesse Strader call, man. All right. I was betting on a guy who's got a lot of power against a dude that doesn't have a lot of experience. I swung. I missed. I know. This is at least a proven guy. It's a little bit different of a situation. But yes, I get your point. All right. Moving on. We're gonna say Vicente Luque wins this fight. I like the decision lean because, if anything, Tyron Woodley has been extremely difficult to finish. Hasn't been knocked out since Nate Marquardt way back in the day. So I think that decision lean is probably a good one. And I got to shout out my guy Tom Chambers. He gave me the rub there with my my round 3 sprinkles. Maybe that's the way I can live vicariously here. Get Tyron Woodley round 3, Vicente Luque round 3, and then as long as someone goes down right at the end of the fight, I don't care who it is. Maybe that's the way to go, and I can get just a little taste of betting against Vicente Luque because I'm like an addict, man. I need it. All right, it is main event time, everybody. We have 416 live viewers. Thank you all so much for spending your Monday night with us this evening. Me and my guy James Lynch breaking down UFC 260. Stipe Miocic, the undisputed greatest heavyweight of all time, returns 20-3, welcoming the future king Francis Ngannou 15-3. Man, this rematch, it feels like it's just been hovering over us for years, James. What do you make of this one?
It's another tough fight. This is another close one where I could see, it going either way. I mean, it's not much different than the first fight, in my opinion, where you've got Francis who can end a fight at any moment in the first round. We've seen that in the last couple of fights. You look at a guy like Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who a couple of weeks ago went to a decision with Cyril Gane. He gets finished in 20 seconds by Ngannou. So it's interesting to see what happens. And Stipe is the guy that you keep counting out. He keeps winning, right? I mean, lost to Cormier. I don't think a lot of people felt like he was going to beat Cormier in the rematch. He beats Cormier in a comeback win, right? Cormier was winning. He ended up coming back. And then the last fight, he ends up winning a decision decisively in that one. So, Stipe can get it done. 38 years old, a little bit of a height and reach advantage in this one. This is what I'm kind of basing this fight on. I'm going to keep it a little bit simple in this one and not dig too deep into it. Obviously, Stipe won the first fight. I do wonder, a couple years later, that first fight was in 2018. This fight's in 2021. Stipe's been finished in between there. He got finished by Cormier. He's a little bit older. Francis switched some things up from that first fight. He's not with Fernand Lopez anymore. He's with Eric Nixick. We know Eric Nixick's a great coach. Look at Dan Ige a couple weeks ago with that win over Gavin Tucker. You would hope the cardio issues are fixed. That was another issue that I think he learned from in his last fight. I think Francis takes this, and I know a lot of people are like, how on earth is he the favorite when Stipe isn't? Because Stipe's older. Stipe's, he's just like, at some point the wheels have got to fall off at some point, and I think this might be the fight here. And I just think all Francis needs to do in this fight is clip Stipe and get it done. I know that's easier said than done, but I think even if it goes later, I can't see Francis making the same mistake like last time and gassing out against Stipe, and Stipe is able to take over. I would assume he's fixed that. So I'm going Francis Ngannou in this fight. I said this on my show this morning. I would love Stipe to win. I think this guy's criminally underrated. And obviously I'm underrating him here if I'm picking Ngannou in the fight. But I think at some point that's got to end here. And I know if you guys remember a couple of years ago, back when Jones beat Daniel Cormier, and Dana White said this as a presser. I think people forget this. When John Jones beat Daniel Cormier at UFC 214, he was going to fight Stipe in December. A lot of people forget that. But then Jones obviously got busted for steroids. That was pushed along, and then Stipe had to fight whoever, and everything sort of continued from there. But I do think in the back of the head, Stipe's like, I got to win this, and then I got to fight Jones, and then that's it. I know hasn't indicated retirement, but I got to think that's in the back of his head. He doesn't want to take too much damage. He's a firefighter, whatever. I think with Francis, he's got plenty of a career left, even though he's a couple of years younger than Stipe. But I don't know. I just feel like this time Francis gets it done. I'd love to be proven wrong, but because again, I like Stipe. I think he's probably the most underrated champion in the history of the sport, but I think Francis gets him this time, Clint. I'm curious your thoughts.
So James, I'm struggling on this one, man. I'm struggling. I bet on Stipe Miocic in his fight against Daniel Cormier. Like I said, we've got that line, there are no fairy tale endings in MMA. We used that against Daniel Cormier. I understand the greatness of Stipe Miocic. I've done my very best over the couple of years to poke holes in this man's record. You look back and he's just got an unchallengeable resume, right? But you go, Andre Arlovsky, he was getting to the end of his career. He wasn't that great at that point. Fabricio Verdum, he got over aggressive. He made some bad choices. He went kind of downhill from there. Alistair Overeem, he's chinny now. He lost his chin. He's no good. Junior Dos Santos, he's a shell of himself. But you know what? Even though now, 4, 5, 6 years later, those guys are all washed and maybe out of the UFC, at the time, they weren't quite done yet. Yeah. And he still got those wins. And he still knocked all of them out. Like, we've got to respect what Stipe has done. But we also have to be realistic about the fact that MMA is a young man's game. Back in 2018, Stipe was able to weather the first round storm of Francis Ngannou. He was able to dig deep and force this thing into a grappling match and grind out a 25-minute session. But man, that was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Stipe's 38 now. Y'all know my rule. When it gets to 40, you better have a damn good reason to back him at 40 years old. Since that fight with Francis Ngannou, Stipe has been knocked out in the first round by Daniel Cormier, and then taken as much damage and significant strikes as literally half of his illustrious UFC career. He's taken nearly 300 significant strikes in the past 3 fights alone. Now, I know Daniel Cormier is a future Hall of Famer. I know that guy has got hand speed, he's got power, he's the complete package. But the fact of the matter is Stipe has gone to war in his last 3 fights. Now he's got to take on the biggest power puncher we have ever seen. I mean, a guy with ungodly next-level power. And what we maybe forget, what I actually forgot until I dug back into this, James, is that Francis Ngannou really rode into that Stipe fight expecting to walk through the champ. Like, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to win that fight. He took it on short notice. He had no training camp for it. And do you remember he went to France like the week of the fight?
Yeah.
He flew to France and did some media crap and came back. The dude had no gas tank in that fight, more so than we've ever seen him, because he wasn't training. Like, he was being given the gold medal before he ever stepped in the cage and was doing podcasts and shows. And he wasn't in the gym for any of it. And he had just come off of a fight. Like, that's a bad way to try to take the title. And if you've done anything on social media, you've seen nothing but gym photos of Francis Ngannou. And you know what you've seen is a lot of body weight stuff. I know this again. I might be getting my tinfoil cap out here, James.
No, you're right.
But I think
100% right.
I think he's put a lot of effort into that gas tank. He's doing all kinds of body weight exercises, medicine ball exercises, high repetition stuff. His gas tank, I think, is going to be something different than what we have ever seen come Saturday. And we don't have to really worry about Francis getting knocked out because he's nothing but durable. Now, I say that, watch, Stipe is going to knock him out in the first round or something stupid. But we don't have to worry about much of anything with Francis except that gas tank, right? Like, you got to think that Stipe is looking to recreate the last fight here, because what other path does he really have? If he goes to war and he stands his foot in the ground and goes toe-to-toe, sticks in the center of the cage with Ngannou, no one wins that fight. Nobody wins that fight. Stipe's got to rely on his speed, his head movement, and his wrestling to get through this thing. And I don't think a 38-year-old version of Stipe, who's taken a ton of punishment, who's more hittable than he's ever been, who's slower than he's ever been, is going to be able to do that against Francis Ngannou. I've said for the last 3 years, ever since the first fight happened, that when these guys rematch, Stipe is going down. Francis Ngannou will win the rematch, and we see, and this isn't just my opinion, but in MMA, James, when fighters rematch, the younger fighter wins. It's something at like an 85% clip, a 90% clip, something crazy like that the younger fighter wins rematches in MMA fights. And I don't see much of a path for Stipe here beyond what we saw in the last fight, and that's a tall order if Francis has his gas tank in check. I don't like Francis being the favorite. That's something I've been on record saying a lot, is that it feels disrespectful when a current sitting champion is the underdog to a challenger. We saw that with Peter Yan and Aljo Sterling, right?
And Jan Blachowicz and Israel Adesanya.
Exactly. You go anytime the champion gets put as the underdog, alarm bells start going off, because that means the underdog, or not the underdog, but the should be underdog, the challenger, is overhyped. Coming into that fight, the champion deserves some respect. So from a betting standpoint, I don't like that Francis is the favorite. But what I can tell you that I do like, Francis opened up at minus 225. It's been nothing but Stipe money driving this fight down to a pick'em. And this is one of my favorite spots, James. I know everybody mocks me and everyone gets on me. I sometimes talk batshit crazy. I sometimes have some of the hottest takes on the internet today. But I love planting my flag. I love going against the grain. And I don't want Francis at minus 225. I don't want Francis at minus 175. Francis at minus 115? That sounds like a bet that I could make. So I think I'm going to pick Francis to be the champion that I've always claimed he would be and knew come Saturday. And I think I'm going to pull that trigger, man. If I get that minus 120, that minus 115 on Francis Ngannou, I think I'm headed to the window.
Ngannou by TKO as well as plus 105, Clint. I don't know if you saw that too.
I get that.
That's a little tempting too. I mean, you could maybe do both, right? You could just do that and then maybe take a little sprinkle on the knockout prop. I mean, it's just crazy that, like, think about that for just 1 second here. Francis Ngannou, probably the hardest hitter in the UFC by far, like in terms of power. It's plus money to get him by knockout. And I know it's Stipe, and I'm sure, like, I can just see us coming back here on Monday and Stipe gets the win or something, and I just look like an idiot. But it is kind of crazy that that's plus money, is it not?
Yeah, I mean,
Think
that's
of
what
who
he
knocked
does.
out, Curtis Blades. Like, it's just, I don't know. I just sort of look at that. One other thing I forgot to mention as well that I do think is a key thing about the camp switch up for this fight, right? Because he's been at Extreme Couture for a couple of years now. Look who he's getting to train with. Roy Nelson, Tim Johnson, who's in Bellator, Vinny Magalesh. Like, he has bodies in the gym that he gets to work with. Stipe is working with Alexa Kammer. And Jeff Hughes, I don't even know. I think Jeff Hughes might have retired, to be honest. He's out of the UFC. Like, who's he working with? That's got to at some point catch up to him. At some point, you would think. Right. So that's another reason to like Francis in this fight. Anyways, that's all.
That's a very valid point. I mean, Francis, he, for a long time there in his career, he had that big fish, little pond thing going on where he was just such a freak of nature. It didn't matter where he trained or who he trained with. He just hit people hard enough they fell over. Now he's at a good gym. Now he's got good coaches. Now he's got big bodies. He's got good training partners. I'm expecting improvements from Francis Ngannou, especially in the gas tank, and I think that's probably the most important factor here for him. And let's be real. You go back and you watch that fight, man. Stipe had nothing left to give. Like, it took everything he had to wrestle Francis Ngannou for 25 minutes. If Francis Ngannou's cardio or takedown defense is just ever so slightly better, he's going to be extremely favorable in this spot. And just one punch from Francis Ngannou, and I think Stipe really only got hit with like 2 or 3 of them. His face was already like welted up there in that first round. If he hits clean just once, it's over. And now he's 3 years older. He's taken a ton more damage. I got to go with the younger fighter. I got to go with the challenger. Francis Ngannou and new, baby. I'm in. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, we'll be talking on Saturday for sure about that fight as far as how it unfolds. But great fight, man. I know this pay-per-view took a hit with Volkanovski being off here, but I almost like this card, even though it's not like super flashy, because you just have so many intangible, like so many weird things on this card, like with the close matchups or the Hanny Goldy and Penne fight, which who knows how that fight's going to go, right? So I'm very intrigued by that for sure.
It's a very strange one, man. It's weird because it's super top heavy. I mean, I'd pay the pay-per-view price just to watch Francis Ngannou and Stipe. So that's kind of what we end up with here, right? Like, it's kind of thin underneath those two after that. But I mean, UFC's been kind of cursed the last couple weeks. The cards have been crazy. Some of the weirdest stuff we've ever seen in the sport has been happening. And now we've got this card where there's question marks on every single damn fight. Like, there's not a single fight on this card that anybody can say they have a confident read in. I mean, if you do say you've got a confident read, you're either smarter than me or you've got a crystal ball. Like, there's just no way anybody can be confident in anything on this card. So I think we're in for another batshit crazy night, James. I'm going to go get myself a bottle of Fireball. It's been a couple weeks. I've been saving it up, giving my liver a break. I'm going to have some fun on Saturday, and I'm going to try and snipe off maybe a handful of small spots where we can put some units back in our pocket and just have a damn good night watching fights.
Yeah, same here. I'll be doing the live stream on my channel on Saturday. If any of you guys are watching, want to join me and JHK and maybe Ryan Galloway going to join. Maybe you can join. I know you do your live stream every now and then, but we'll be getting some people on the stream for sure throughout the evening. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Good deal, James. The floor is yours, my friend. Let the people know where they can find you and all your wonderful content. Well, as you can see here at Lynch on Sports, I'll tell you right now who I got for this card. So like I mentioned, the live hangout stream, I did a full preview of the card, but you already watched this one, so why do you need to watch mine? We've got the pros picks for Stipe and Ngannou. I did 4 videos on that. I did 2 pros picks videos on Luque and Woodley. You can watch that as well. Again, these are just opinion videos. People are like, the pros don't know shit. Well, you know what? It's just an opinion video. You can't take it too seriously. I just put them out for people's entertainment. Also, I have interviews with Hannah Goldy, Vicente Luque, Modestas Bukauskas, and Khama Worthy. So there you go. And I just interviewed Curtis Blades today. If you guys want to check that out, first interview since he lost to Derek Lewis. Really interesting stuff there when he's looking to return. His pick for Saturday's main event. A lot of good stuff there from Curtis as well. And if you missed it last week, I interviewed Eddie Alvarez. Really good stuff from the former UFC champ talking about Conor and Dustin and what's all the mess that's going on in the lightweight division. A lot of good stuff there from Eddie Alvarez as well. You can find that all on my channel, youtube.com/LynchOnSports. And Clint, more importantly, thank you for having me on here. I love it. It's always a pleasure, man. James, it's a blast, man. You're absolutely one of my favorite guests. I love hanging out with you live. One of these days, we're going to do it in person. Hopefully, COVID can get cleared up sooner than later. Once this border opens up, man, we're getting some beers when I head over to Arizona. Quick plane ride for me from Vancouver. So that's what I'm talking about, man. Let's do it. I'm totally down for that. That's where it's at right there. Hopefully next year we're a little better because right now we're in a bit of a skid. But yeah, definitely going to a Coyotes game. Our Canucks are terrible, but anyways, yeah, so I can relate. All right, man. We've got 377 people still hanging with us. Thank you all so much for spending your Monday evening here with us. Do me a favor, show my guy James love. give him a follow over on Twitter. Give him a follow over on YouTube. He puts out some of the best content for us, especially us bettors that are looking for that inside track on the fighters' mindsets and things like that. He puts out some amazing stuff. So make sure you give my guys some support. Thank you all very much for spending your evening here with me tonight. And hey, as always, everybody, not everything goes your way. We learned that lesson hard last week. We're coming off a bit of a skid, a couple of losing weeks in a row. We dust ourselves off. We pick ourselves back up and we keep coming forward. We are insatiable, and you've got to have that never quit mentality. Let's go out. Let's kick some ass. I will see you all later this week. Make sure you tune in for Total Madness. I'll be posting that up on most likely coming out on Thursday. And then, of course, we've got the post-weigh-in show on Fridays. So tune into that. You all make sure you have a wonderful week. We'll catch you next time. Let's roll.